Hi, this is Chris Monk, owner of Highline Guitars, and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I think I'm just going to be talking about the guitar build that I'm currently working on. And I will try to offer some tips and advice about building, because I know that's what a lot of you like. What I'm currently working on is a new design, which is actually an old design that I've updated. And that original design I call the Osiris, and I'm going to be using that name for this current build. And what I'm hoping to do is offer this guitar design in a couple of different configurations and different component levels. And then I'm going to be offering them up for sale on my Highline Guitars Reverb page. If you go there now, you'll find I've got a couple of Apollyon guitars, 7-string multi-scales. And what I'm hoping to do with this design is I'll offer it as a 6-string 25.5-inch scale guitar, as well as a 7-string multi-scale. I'm really getting into this multi-scale thing. I love how those guitars play. But this guitar is going to be a mahogany body with a flame maple top. And this particular build is going to be a standard build, in that I will offer it with what I consider standard components, and that will be a gato bridge, gato tuners, nickel silver fret wire, probably just some generic pots, switch, and jack, and basic wiring. It will have my own custom wound humbuckers, but this will differ slightly from the deluxe models, which are going to have, I hope, hip shot bridge, hip shot locking tuners, stainless steel fret wire, CTS control pots, and switchcraft switches and jacks. So, and a little bit more exotic wiring. I'm looking to do some coil tapping, but it'll also have the same Highline humbucker pickups. And of course, anytime I build these guitars, if I decide I want to do like a single coil or a P90 or something like that, I can always just change the file a little bit and create a different configuration for it. The neck on this guitar is going to be flame maple and with a catalogue fretboard. And like I said before, it's going to be just a plain nickel silver fret wire for the standard models. The deluxe will get stainless steel. So what I'm doing right now is I'm applying a boiled linseed oil finish to this guitar. I decided not to do any kind of this color stain or anything like that. I just wanted to do something natural. And I do basically a couple of different oil-based finishes. And I really enjoy using oil-based finishes because they're hand-rubbed, and it's so much more natural looking. And it just appeals to me. I use two different kinds of products for this. I use either a tongue oil or, like I said, boiled linseed oil. The tongue oil is pure tongue oil. It's unprocessed. The boiled linseed oil is basically raw linseed oil, which has been modified with drying agents to help it dry faster. So the question some people will have is, what's the difference between the boiled linseed oil and the tongue oil? And in terms of appearance, this particular brand, this is Wood River brand tongue oil, and I get this from my local woodcraft store. When you apply it to the wood, it doesn't really change the color cast of the wood that much. It'll darken it slightly, but it doesn't add any sort of a shift in the warmth of the wood's color. And so, when you're using a wood stain and you put the stain down and you like the way the color looks, if you put a tongue oil or a boiled linseed oil over the top of it, it can shift the color a little bit. And tongue oil seems to do that less than boiled linseed oil. Boiled linseed oil has a golden amber, a very rich golden amber color. And when you apply it to the wood, it definitely darkens it much more than tongue oil does. Now, one of the advantages of these products is, like I said, they're easy to apply, but the disadvantage is they can take a long, long time to dry. Even the boiled linseed oil, which has drying agents added to it, can take several days or even weeks to dry. Tongue oil can take a long time. It can take weeks to dry. What I like to do to help speed up the process is to add a drying agent. And there are several available, but I found that Clean Strips Japan dryer seems to work pretty well with these two products. When I mix just a few drops into about, say, 1/8 of a cup of tung oil and then apply it to the surface, I'll let it soak in, wipe off the excess about 30 minutes later, and then usually 6 to 10 hours later, it's completely dry and I can add another coat. And the nice thing about that is you can build up coats over several days. You could actually start in the morning, apply a coat, wipe it off and let it sit all day, then apply another coat later in the evening, and then continue that for several days. And what will happen is the first several coats will soak into the wood and you'll think, wow, it didn't really do anything. But then it'll suddenly start to build up. It won't soak into the wood, and then each successive coat after that will begin to build up in layers. And the other cool thing is when you apply this, you can actually add a little bit, and this is something you would do towards the end. You can add a little bit of mineral spirits to it to thin it out, and then wet sand it on using, like a 600 grit wet dry sandpaper, or and then maybe work your way up to like a 1500 grit. And the end result is you get incredibly smooth surface. And then once that's dried and cured, you can take it to a buffing machine and buff it up to a polish, and it actually works quite well. Boiled linseed oil is, it will react the same way with the Japan dryer. It will dry much faster, but like I said, when you put this stuff down, it will darken the wood a little bit more than the tung oil will. So I like to use this when I'm doing just one of these simple natural finishes where I'm just applying oil and that's it, because it will enhance the wood grain. It, as you can see, or at least I hope you can see, it'll bring out the figure in the wood, and it does a nice job of that. And you can apply it the same way. You can wipe it on, let it sit, wipe off the excess, and then let it dry, and then just continue to build up coats. You can even add a little bit of polyurethane to the finish. Just pour a little polyurethane into it, wipe it on, wipe it off, and then you'll have this very thin layer of polyurethane, which adds a little bit more durability. These type of finishes, I really only recommend if you're building a guitar from a good hardwood like mahogany and maple. If you're using wood like alder or poplar, basswood, pine, any of those really soft woods, you've got to start looking at using a much more durable clear coat like nitrocellulose, polyurethane, polyester, those kind of products. So, but the oil-based finishes work great with a good solid hardwood. So, where I'm at right now is I've applied probably 4 or 5 coats of the boiled linseed oil, and I've wet sanded it with the 600 grit. What I did was I put about 1/8 of a cup of the boiled linseed oil with a few drops of Japan dryer, and then a couple tablespoons of mineral spirits, and that thinned it out enough to where I could wet sand it with the 600 grit. And now I'm going to switch and do 1500 grit, and I'll apply it and wet sand it with the 1500 grit, and then I'll let that dry probably overnight, and then I'll follow that up by taking that same mixture and adding some polyurethane to it to give the final coats a little bit more durability. And I won't do that on the neck, however, because I don't like the way polyurethane feels on the neck. I'm just going to leave this straight boiled linseed oil. Okay, so after I've wet sanded my boiled linseed oil and polyurethane mix onto the surface of the guitar, I'm going to hang it up from the ceiling and let it sit here. And I'm going to come back in about 10 to 15 minutes and check on the surface, because typically what happens is that boiled linseed oil will separate from the polyurethane, and the polyurethane will dry very quickly, but the boiled linseed oil will form little spots of oil on the surface that needs to be removed, and I'll have to go back in with a paper towel and just lightly wipe the surface to take that off. So I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, I doubt you can see the oil on the surface. It's just very tiny little shiny spots that just literally cover the entire thing. And that's just the excess oil that has separated out from the polyurethane. The polyurethane itself has dried on a very thin film, so I just need to go back over and to just lightly wipe the surface with a paper towel to remove that excess oil and get it smooth. And I'll hang it back up, and then I'll probably come back in another 15 to 20 minutes just to make sure that there isn't any additional oil rising to the surface. After that, it's good to let it dry for probably 5 to 6 hours, and then I'll apply another coat. So typically I can get up to 3 coats of the polyurethane in a day, the polyurethane oil mix, and I'm only going to put 2 to 3 coats, really no more than that. So I'll be back in about 20 minutes. When I apply my oil and my oil polyurethane blend to the top, it's just a matter of applying it, letting it sit for a couple of minutes, and then wiping it off. But then on the sides where this end grain is, we have this issue wherever that end grain is exposed, and that's usually here, around the front, and then around the back. What I find works best is to put down the oil and poly mix, wipe it on, let it sit a little bit, and then wipe it off, and then let it dry a couple of hours. Then, before applying the next coat, I'll come back in with some 400 grit sandpaper. This is 3M's 216U, which is a paper that I really like to use. And I'll just lightly sand these areas. After sanding the entire surface of the body with 400 grit sandpaper, the next thing I needed to do is wipe down the surface to remove any sanding dust, because you don't want that to contaminate the finish as it's wiped on, because it will if you're not careful. And I'll set that aside. Now this is my boiled linseed oil, polyurethane, Japan drier, and a little bit of thinner. And the exact ratio, it's mostly boiled linseed oil. It's probably, I would say 1 part boiled linseed oil, half a part of polyurethane, maybe a 1/4 part of mineral spirits, and then just a couple of drops, a drop or 2 of Japan drier to help speed it up and dry faster. Now actually, when I first mixed this up, there was quite a bit more, but I've already put on a number of coats, so I'm getting down to the last. I don't like to mix up more than I actually am going to need for a guitar project, because with the Japan drier added to it, it just doesn't have any shelf life. So I would end up throwing out more than I want to. So, and this stuff stays wet for quite a while. You don't have to rush it, but at the same time, you don't want to linger over any areas for too long. Just make sure every bit of surface has been covered and that the whole thing looks uniformly wet. I'm going to move on to the sides, just putting down an ample coating of it, making sure everything is completely covered, but not applying it so heavy that it could cause runs or drips. We're always being told that when we use oil-based finishes, we need to dispose of the rags properly. But it never seems like anyone tells you exactly how you're supposed to do that. And to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't 100% sure of myself as I was producing this video. But I will say that this is not the way you do it. When you use rags to apply oil-based finishes, what happens is the solvents and dryers and the various chemicals will evaporate out, and as they evaporate, they generate heat. And when you pile up all the rags together, like you see here, there's a chance that they're going to spontaneously combust and burn down my shop. So what I do instead is I lay the rags out on the concrete floor of my shop in an area that's out of the way. And I'll let these sit here for a couple of days until they fully dried, and then I'll place them inside of a coffee can or a bucket that I've filled with water, get them good and soaked, and then dispose of them that way, and thus avoid the risk of burning down my shop. So I think that's really important, that anytime I talk about doing oil-based finishes, I need to reinforce the advice not to do this. And then once I have this completely covered in a uniform layer of the oil and polyurethane, I'm just going to go back and start to wipe off the excess. And it will look like I'm wiping off all of the finish, but in truth, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm taking off the excess, but I'm spreading what's left into a really thin layer. And it's extremely smooth. And what I'm using to apply and wipe this off is just regular paper towels. They seem to work just fine. In particular, I really like Viva brand paper towels because they produce far less lint than most other paper towel brands. So that's what I like to use. Okay, so here's another tip. When you sand between coats, you can start out at 400 and then work your way up with each coat. So you would start with 400, then you would jump to 600, and then you could probably finish with 800. And each session of sanding will produce an even smoother and smoother surface. So that just makes it look a whole lot better. Now I'm going to let this sit, and I'm going to, well, it's going to hang up actually. And when I come back and check it, if the surface looks as good as I think it will, I'm then going to let it sit for probably 4 to 5 days to cure off more thoroughly. And then at that point, I'll be ready to put the finish on the finish. And that's something which I'll explain in the next episode from the Luthier's Workbench. So stay tuned.